Hi there. For our presentation over a contemporary nursing issue, we have chosen to discuss the concept of whistleblowing and its applications to professional practice. This presentation should provide you with adequate knowledge to recognize what types of circumstances may require whistleblowing, how to prepare to blow the whistle, and what protections you should be accorded after blowing the whistle. For further information regarding whistleblowing, we have included references at the end which may be a resource to you in your professional practice. Additionally, you may contact one of the authors, myself, Rebecca Gunn, Sarah Ann Porter, Natalie Premont, or Camry Wittermeyer with any questions you have regarding the content of our presentation. Quickly, we would like to outline some learning objectives we wish to achieve through this presentation. Following this presentation, students should have a sufficient understanding of the concept of whistleblowing to be able to define whistleblowing and relate this concept to their own professional nursing practice. Students will be able to analyze the issue of whistleblowing from an ethical perspective and the particular role of the nurse in these situations. Students will evaluate legal issues and protections related to whistleblowing and evaluate hospital policies regarding this matter. Lastly, students will examine the impact of cultural factors on whistleblowing in the context of healthcare organizations. Before we begin, we should establish a definition of whistleblowing. According to Mansbach, Ziedenberg, and Bachner, whistleblowing is defined as a report by a current or former organization member of illegal, immoral, or illegitimate practices under the control of their employers to persons or organizations that may be able to affect action. Although at first it may appear that this issue is very black and white, there are a variety of complicating factors that may deter individuals following through with blowing the whistle. The process of deciding to blow the whistle can cause great moral distress, and we will explore these issues in more depth throughout this presentation. A few main points of our presentation are outlined here on this slide. Since a significant role of the nurse is to be an advocate of the patient and ethical care in general, it is the responsibility of the nurse to report practices that are viewed as immoral, illegal, or illegitimate to the public or an agency that can take action in order to correct these wrongdoings observed. As was previously mentioned, reporting these matters can be morally and legally distressing due to potential consequences that the nurse may face. Because of this, hospitals should create and enforce strong policies that encourage and protects those who come forward to report malpractice. The Winkler County case, which will be discussed in further detail later in this presentation, is a prime example of the need for strong hospital policies and legal codes protecting whistleblowers from any potential retaliation. Clearly, whistleblowing and the manner in which these reports are handled can have a profound impact on the hospital culture and the likelihood that nurses will come forward to make reports when unsafe or unethical practices are observed.
As a new graduate entering the nursing profession, you are a set of fresh eyes observing your hospital's practices for the first time, which means you may be more likely to take notice of incorrect or unethical practices that other nurses have become accustomed to. According to the Code of Ethics put forth by the American Nurses Association, nurses are charged both individually and as a profession with establishing and maintaining an ethical healthcare environment. As the largest healthcare profession, and the profession most often found at the bedside, nurses are uniquely positioned to take notice of illegitimate, unethical, or unsafe practices and bring them to light to promote safe and quality health care. As nurses, we're accorded a certain level of respect and authority by society. We're considered civil servants, and therefore are expected to advocate for patients and to protect the public's interest by reporting wrongdoing. A key component of nursing practice and acting as a civil servant is observing principles of ethical healthcare. These principles, which will be explored further in this presentation, can be a guiding force when deciding whether to blow the whistle. As nurses, we must consider whether our actions are in accordance with the principles of ethical healthcare. When choosing whether to blow the whistle, the ethical principles shown here can be of particular use in the decision-making process. Fidelity, which involves honoring our covenant to care for the patient, requires nurses to blow the whistle in order to make good on our promise to promote the patient's best interest above all else. To uphold fidelity, the nurse could ask herself, does this questionable practice honor or degrade the promise I made to heal and protect my patients? Veracity, which involves being truthful and practicing integrity in our patient interactions, calls nurses to bring wrongdoing to light and requires that the involved parties be made aware of the situation. To uphold veracity, the nurse could ask herself, are we concealing relevant information from the patient, or are we being truthful about this practice and its effects on the patient? Non-maleficence, which is the principle that deals with preventing harm to the patient, requires that nurses report any unsafe or illegitimate practices in order to prevent further harm and address any harm already done. To uphold non-maleficence, the nurse could ask herself, has this questionable practice brought any form of harm to a patient, or does it have the potential to bring harm to a patient in the future? And beneficence, which requires nurses to do good for their patients, demands that nurses correct unethical or unsafe practices in order to ensure the healthcare system is doing the maximum good possible for the patient. To uphold beneficence, the nurse could ask herself, is this practice in question aiding or impeding the ability of the healthcare team to do the maximum good possible for our patients? Despite this ethical duty to blow the whistle, there are a number of factors that might discourage a nurse from making a report. Chief among these are workplace culture, the Auschwitz effect, unofficial retaliation, fear of rejection or self-incrimination, and lack of organization responsiveness. Workplace culture can often promote a team mentality that encourages protecting the interests of the healthcare team above all else. This leads to a tendency to judge the actions of coworkers based on their good intentions rather than on actual impact. When thinking in survival terms, or in terms of what is best for the healthcare team and for the unit, nurses can come to the conclusion that unsafe or unethical actions are not worthy of reporting. Similarly, the Auschwitz effect, a phenomenon in which average people do something they think is wrong, if instructed to do so by someone in authority, may encourage nurses to engage in and rationalize wrongdoing instead of reporting. In the event that the nurse does recognize and wish to report wrongdoing, unofficial retaliation in the form of social isolation, stigma, or interference with career growth may serve as a strong deterrent. Additionally, fear of rejection or self-incrimination can have a similar effect. If a nurse is afraid that the report may be rejected for insufficient evidence, or if she is afraid of self-incriminating due to prior participation in the wrongdoing, she may delay reporting or decide not to report at all. Finally, a lack of organization responsiveness may lead to a decision not to whistleblow. If the organization receiving the whistleblowing report is unlikely to take prompt action based on the report, or the nurse believes that the report will not result in any significant practice change, this can lead to feelings of impotence and disenfranchisement in potential whistleblowers and decrease the likelihood of reporting.
Let's examine a real-life example of whistleblowing and the difficulties that come with it. In rural West Texas, a physician was abusing his position by attempting to sell products to patients in the emergency room and stealing hospital supplies to perform procedures on patients at home instead of in the hospital. Two nurses filed a complaint anonymously, and the physician was told he was going to be investigated. With the assistance of the town sheriff, the doctor eventually figured out who filed the complaints. The nurses were charged with misuse of official information and were quickly terminated. One of the nurses had the charges against her dropped, and the jury found the other one not guilty. Thankfully, justice was served in this situation, as all of the parties involved in the corruption received some form of punishment. The physician, who pled guilty to one count of misuse of officiation information and one count of retaliation, was sentenced to 60 days in jail, fined $5,000, signed an order with the Texas Medical Board to voluntarily surrender his state medical license, and faced the possibility of the board revoking his license on account of a felony conviction. Additionally, a close friend of the physician illegitimately obtained the names of the nurses who wrote the letter and gave them to the physician. He was convicted of 2 counts of retaliation, 2 of official misuse of information, and 2 counts of official oppression. He was sentenced to 100 days in jail, 4 years of probation, and fined $6,000. Another accomplice to the physician acquired the identity of the 2 nurses, urged the grand jury to indict the nurses, and prosecuted the case against one of the nurses. He was convicted of 2 counts of retaliation, 2 of misuse of information, and 2 of oppression, and was also sentenced to 120 days in jail, 10 years of probation, and fined $6,000. The former administrator of Winkler County Memorial Hospital, who fired the nurses, pled guilty to 1 count of abuse of an official capacity and was sentenced to 30 days in jail. Each man involved in the retaliation suffered legal and personal consequences, and together they agreed to pay each nurse $375,000 in order to settle the lawsuit. Although justice was ultimately served, there's no doubt that each nurse suffered emotional, financial, and social distress, which no amount of money can fix. Cases like this make it abundantly clear why nurses may be hesitant to report and why protections at both the legal and hospital level are necessary.
One of the policies put in place to protect whistleblowers is the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, which states, "No person shall discharge or in any manner discriminate against any employee because such employee has filed any complaint or instituted or caused to be instituted any proceeding under or related to this act." The Occupational Safety and Health Act was put in place December 29th of 1970 by President Richard Nixon because of occupational injuries and illnesses that were increasing in both number and severity. The Act established 3 permanent agencies. The first agency is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, within the Labor Department to set and enforce workplace safety and health standards. The second agency is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, in what was then the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare to conduct research on occupational safety and health. The third agency is the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, which is an independent agency to adjudicate enforcement actions challenged by employers. The specific protections for whistleblowers are outlined in the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 and the Texas Health and Safety Code 161.134. The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 is a federal law governing the safety and health of the workers in the United States. This law provides federal protections for whistleblowers and methods of recourse for employees who fear retaliation or discrimination after reporting. The Texas Health and Safety Code 161.134 is a law specific to the state of Texas that provides protections for whistleblowers. The code enables damages to be awarded to employees experiencing discrimination after reporting. The Texas Health and Safety Code also requires healthcare facilities to notify employees and the public that there is protection from discrimination or retaliation after reporting the violation of the law. In addition to the legal protections afforded to whistleblowers, having strong hospital policies encouraging and protecting whistleblowing are important as well. On this slide, we have outlined a few policy suggestions that might serve to encourage reporting. Instituting a pseudonym program to keep reporters anonymous could be a way to encourage whistleblowing and to decrease the fear of retaliation and discrimination. The program would serve to keep the reporter's identity confidential when at all possible, but should also serve to make employees aware of instances where anonymity may not be possible. Create an online reporting system and designating employees on each unit to receive verbal or written reports would serve to alleviate some of the confusion surrounding how to make a report. There should be clear instructions outlined and explained during employee onboarding or orientation regarding the process of reporting online and in person, as well as signage posted throughout the hospital and on the units indicating where and how reports can be made. Contracting a third-party service to aid in the objective evaluation of reports can be useful to reach solutions that are fair and appropriate to all parties involved. If direct employees of the hospital system are solely responsible for reviewing the reports, the objectivity of the evaluation could be compromised, and there may be an increased risk of retaliation against the whistleblowers. Putting forth a hospital statement outlining the organization's support for whistleblowers and the expectation that employees will report instances of wrongdoing can increase the likelihood that reports will be made by increasing employee confidence that the reports will be well received and properly handled. Employees who feel supported by their employer in reporting will feel more empowered to blow the whistle when necessary. Following the submission of a report, there should be a requirement of transparency throughout the investigative process. Results should be released to all parties who may be involved or affected to provide them peace of mind in knowing that the report is being fully and objectively processed. Blowing the whistle can be a stressful experience that is only further complicated by a lack of information regarding the outcome of the report. Finally, providing all employees with specific information regarding recourse in the event that discrimination is suspected after reporting is vital to ensuring that employees feel comfortable blowing the whistle. Individuals that experience official and unofficial retaliation after making a report deserve to know what their options are and what resources they can utilize to correct the situation. Although these policies cannot ensure that all employees will make a report when it is necessary to do so, they can increase the likelihood that the reports will be made.
Outlined on this slide are some of the cultural implications related to whistleblowing. There is the culture of silence, where there is fear of reporting mistakes because of retaliation or punitive measures. The people who whistleblow are highly stigmatized in a culture of silence, and reports are unlikely to be made. Healthcare organizations that promote a culture of safety create an environment of personal accountability where whistleblowing is seen as a duty to the profession and to the patients. Having just culture promotes improvement of practices through restorative justice. Rather than targeting individuals and silencing concerns, reports are treated as opportunities to increase safety. For us as nurses, it would be much preferred to work in this environment over the culture of silence, and whistleblowing is much more likely to occur and be well received in a culture of safety. Fear should not be a motivating factor in deciding to whistleblow or not. In fact, the cultural implications for whistleblowing go beyond hospital walls. Nursing has been ranked as the most honest and ethical profession for the past 16 years. We are relied upon by the public for protection in their most vulnerable moments, and upholding this trust society has placed in us requires that we correct unsafe and unethical practice when we observe them. If you should need to blow the whistle in your own professional practice, This slide contains some tips from the American Nurses Association on how to prepare to make a report. Gather sufficient data regarding the matter. Seek another person's perspective from outside the organization before filing the report, and consult the State Board of Nursing or Ethics Committee for legal counsel prior to whistleblowing. Document the complaint in writing and keep a copy for yourself, and document all interactions regarding the whistleblowing to ensure you have proof that your report was complete and received by the appropriate parties. To be legally protected from punitive actions after making a report, you must report to a state or federal regulator in order to activate whistleblower protections. The Joint Commission and the National Committee for Quality Assurance are private organizations and therefore do not activate whistleblowing protections. However, you may include them in your report in addition to state and federal regulating bodies. Finally, ensure you understand the gravity and complete circumstances of the situation before reporting. Frivolous or uninformed whistleblowing ties up important resources and can result in the report being rejected. Blowing the whistle should not be a knee-jerk reaction, but rather the result of careful assessment. Shown on this slide are the references we used in creating this presentation. They might be useful resources to you in your professional practice, particularly if you are considering whistleblowing. And these are the remaining references for our presentation. If you have any questions regarding the content of our presentation, please contact Sarah, myself, Camry, Mason, or Rebecca for any clarification you might need. Thanks, and gig 'em!